trying to prove one thing, that he is the secret son of Prince Charles and Camilla.
He says he has proof that his birth parents are in fact the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall.
A quiet envelope. No seal, no fanfare. Just a simple letter slipped through the gates of Clarence House. Inside, a DNA report with one claim. King Charles has a secret son. What followed wasn't scandal in the tabloids. It was silence, panic, and the crumbling of royal control. This isn't fiction. It's a real story backed by science, whispered in palace halls for decades. And now, it's out. Who is this man? Why has the monarchy stayed silent? And what happens when a royal secret refuses to stay hidden? What you're about to hear could change everything. According to insiders, the envelope contained a letter. Handwritten, precise, and deliberate in tone, it wasn't a rant or an attention-seeking plea. It was a statement, a direct one. I believe I am the biological child of King Charles III. Attached to that letter was a full DNA report from a certified European genetics lab. There was no ambiguity, no margin for doubt. The result reportedly confirmed a 99.9% genetic match. Not to Prince William, not to Prince Harry, but to King Charles himself. For years, there have been whispers about royal secrets, affairs, private scandals, rumors of illegitimate children, some forgotten, others persistent. But few, if any, of those stories have ever come with hard evidence. This one did. The DNA test wasn't submitted anonymously. It wasn't vague. It included documentation, proper lab verification, and a legally obtained chain of custody. What made this different from past rumors was simple. It was scientific, verifiable, and, if true, potentially explosive. Unsurprisingly, Buckingham Palace responded with silence. No public statements, no denials. Press teams were told to disregard inquiries. Legal representatives reportedly began internal reviews almost immediately. But by that point, the story had already started to spread, especially across private legal and media networks in Europe. While official sources inside the palace declined to comment, it was clear something serious was happening behind closed doors. The timing couldn't have been worse for the royal family. King Charles had only recently taken the throne following Queen Elizabeth II's passing. His coronation marked a new chapter for the monarchy. Queen Camilla, long a controversial figure in royal history, had finally secured a position many believed was once unthinkable. And now, during a period when the royal household was trying to stabilize its public image, came a revelation that could reopen old wounds and introduce entirely new ones. The potential implications of such a claim aren't just emotional or symbolic. If there truly is an unacknowledged child of King Charles, that could raise constitutional, legal, and even financial questions. While it's unlikely that any such individual could claim rights to the throne, the existence of a biological heir not publicly acknowledged would still be deeply destabilizing, both within the family and in the eyes of the public. Sources familiar with royal protocols say that claims like this are not new, but what sets this one apart is the complete absence of media sensationalism from the claimant himself. There was no television appearance, no lawsuit, no tabloid tell-all. In fact, reports suggest that the person behind the letter had been silent for decades, seeking legal advice only recently after watching King Charles formally crowned. This person, who later became known as Sebastian David Kiel, reportedly included in the letter a quiet but direct request, not for a title, not for money, but for the truth to be acknowledged. That in itself seems to have made the situation even more difficult for the palace. A demand can be rejected. A quiet plea backed by science is harder to ignore. For Camilla, Queen Consort, the emotional stakes were incredibly high. Reports from palace aides say she was blindsided. The idea that Charles had fathered a child before his well-known relationship with her, and even before Diana, was not only a personal betrayal, but a potential threat to her decades-long fight for legitimacy. She had already endured years of criticism from the public, having been introduced to the British public as the other woman, in Charles and Diana's turbulent relationship. She eventually weathered that storm, but now she was facing a very different kind of scandal. One rooted not in gossip, but in biology. At the heart of the issue is the claim that this alleged affair happened before Charles's marriage to either Diana or Camilla. That detail is crucial. It suggests the child was not the result of adultery, but of a relationship that was known to some within royal circles, but kept discreet. If true, this dramatically shifts the conversation from scandal to history, raising questions about how much the royal family knew and how much it kept from the public. People close to the palace say the emotional response inside was immediate and intense. Staff were placed under pressure to maintain confidentiality. Internal meetings were called at short notice, and legal consultants reportedly worked around the clock to understand the implications. Multiple insiders also claim that Charles, when confronted with the letter, did not initially deny its contents. He reportedly reacted not with shock, but with what one aide described as a haunted silence. Whether that silence was guilt, disbelief, or simply shock remains unclear. What is clear, however, is that the usual mechanisms of royal damage control, silence, delay, and redirection are not working this time. Because unlike so many other royal rumors, this one doesn't rely on anonymous tips or vague memories. It relies on DNA. And DNA, unlike tradition or public relations, doesn't bend easily under pressure. Outside the palace walls, the news was spreading fast. The mainstream press initially hesitated to cover it, but smaller European outlets ran with the story, citing legal documents and unnamed royal sources. In the age of social media, the story took on a life of its own. Hashtags appeared, forums debated the implications, and experts began weighing in on royal succession, paternity law, and the credibility of the evidence. As the information made its way across platforms, the public response was mixed. Some expressed outrage, questioning how something so significant could be hidden for so long. Others were more sympathetic, not only toward Sebastian, but also toward King Charles, who is now navigating a deeply personal crisis on a very public stage. And then there were those who viewed the situation through a historical lens, seeing it as yet another chapter in the monarchy's long and often complicated narrative around family, duty, and secrecy. For now, the palace remains quiet. No official confirmation, no denial, just a wall of silence that many believe is unlikely to hold. The pressure is building, both from within the UK and abroad. Constitutional scholars, journalists, and everyday citizens alike are asking, what happens next? The man at the center of it all, Sebastian, has still not made a public statement. Those close to him say he is calm, well-advised, and determined not to escalate the matter with media stunts or lawsuits. According to sources, his only request is recognition of the truth. And while that might sound simple, within the traditions and politics of the royal household, it may be the most complicated request of all. As the monarchy grapples with modern expectations of transparency, this story may very well mark a turning point. For centuries, the British royal family has relied on formality, discretion, and carefully controlled public appearances. But science, and the public's appetite for truth, doesn't always play by the same rules. Lady Sarah Keell wasn't a tabloid figure. She didn't chase cameras, give interviews, or attend social events for attention. In fact, many who knew her described her as deeply private, calm, and intellectually sharp. Born into aristocracy, she was no stranger to royal circles. She attended the same horse races, dinners, and diplomatic functions as Charles. But unlike many others in those circles, she stood out for her reserve. She was polished, poised, and quietly confident. It's said that the relationship between Charles and Sarah began in the late 1970s, around the time Charles was under increasing pressure to settle down. The Queen, according to biographers, had begun encouraging her son to find a suitable wife, someone with the right pedigree and temperament to fit into royal life. The public had already started speculating about Charles's future, and names were being floated in gossip columns across the UK. But Charles wasn't ready, not for the spotlight that came with marriage, and certainly not for the expectations that came with being next in line to the throne. Insiders say that during this period, Lady Sarah provided a rare sense of stability. She was intelligent, discreet, and grounded. The relationship wasn't flashy. There were no photographs of them together, no press coverage. Everything was kept quiet, partly by design and partly by necessity. Privacy, especially in royal matters, was everything. According to staff who worked in royal residences during that era, the couple spent time together at Balmoral and Sandringham. There are even rumors of a trip to Italy under the cover of an official engagement in 1979. Charles was 30 at the time, restless, still single, and fully aware that the clock was ticking. Camilla had already married Andrew Parker Bowles. Diana, still a teenager, was nowhere near being introduced to royal life. Lady Sarah, on the other hand, was already part of the world Charles moved in. Some former aides and biographers have suggested that there was a plan at one point for Charles and Sarah to become engaged. These claims are difficult to verify, but the story persists in royal circles. What is more widely accepted is that the relationship ended abruptly, and not by mutual decision. Queen Elizabeth reportedly found Sarah too strong-willed for a royal bride, someone not easily shaped by the crown's expectations. If true, it reflects a familiar theme in royal history: personal feelings set aside in favor of tradition. After the relationship ended, Lady Sarah didn't speak publicly. She returned to a quieter life, later marrying a French diplomat and moving to Switzerland. That alone would have been unremarkable, except for one significant detail. Roughly 9 months after her final confirmed meeting with Charles, she gave birth to a son. The birth was private, the father unnamed. Official documents listed no paternal details. The child, Sebastian, was raised in Geneva under the care of Sarah and a team of private tutors. While these details were never officially confirmed by any member of the royal family, they have circulated in quiet circles for years. Some dismissed the rumors outright. Others weren't so sure. Former staff members recalled moments that seemed odd in hindsight. Charles appearing distracted after long phone calls, unusual meetings being scheduled at odd hours, and Lady Sarah's name being deliberately avoided in royal conversation. From a young age, Sebastian's life was unusually well supported. He was enrolled in an elite Montessori school, followed by a prestigious British boarding school. Yet there was no obvious family wealth behind him. The financial backing reportedly came from a trust, one that had no publicly listed benefactor. This trust, according to leaked legal documents, was tied to an offshore entity that once managed assets related to the Duchy of Cornwall, an estate controlled by Charles for decades. Those who knew Sebastian as a boy describe him as curious, reserved, and mature beyond his years. One teacher even recalled saying, half-jokingly, "He carries himself like someone trained for public life." Another commented on his appearance, noting the resemblance to young photographs of Charles. The cheekbones, the posture, even the tone of voice. Still, no one spoke openly about it, not even Sebastian. By the time he was 18, the financial support surrounding Sebastian's life had grown even more structured. He received a new car, expensive, but untraceable in terms of who had purchased it. He was accepted into King's College London, where he studied international law. Again, there were no headlines, no fanfare. He kept a low profile, rarely appeared in photos, and had no social media presence. Former flatmates from that period describe him as generous, calm, and highly private. One claimed, he never said anything about his family, but you could tell something was different. It wasn't normal money. It was polished, structured, and completely invisible. Over the years, sightings of Sebastian near royal residences began to surface, always through back entrances, never through the front. A longtime palace driver claims he once dropped off a young man at Clarence House under special instruction. "No one said his name," he recalled, "but the urgency told me everything." As time passed, the whispers about Charles's lost heir continued to bubble beneath the surface. Occasionally, a journalist would bring it up, never in print, but in conversation. "Have you heard about the other son?" they would ask. Most wouldn't pursue it. The risk of challenging the palace on something that personal, without solid proof, was too high. Even within the family, the name Sarah was reportedly off-limits. Camilla, now queen consort, was said to be particularly uncomfortable with any mention of the past, especially if it involved a romantic connection before her time with Charles. One side claimed that during a private moment, when asked if Charles had ever had a child before Diana, he went pale and changed the subject. The palace has always denied the existence of any illegitimate royal children. Publicly, no comment has ever been made. But the pieces of the story, Lady Sarah's sudden disappearance from public life, the mysterious birth, the untraceable finances, continue to raise questions. Then, of course, came the letter, the DNA evidence, the scientific proof that suggests these years of quiet speculation may have a basis in fact. And while nothing has been formally confirmed by the palace, the story has already outgrown the silence that once protected it. If Sebastian really is the biological son of King Charles III, then this part of the story, Lady Sarah, the secret romance, and the quiet birth of a son, becomes more than just a rumor. It becomes the origin of a chapter in royal history that, until recently, was hidden in plain sight. In the months following the coronation, Sebastian began taking discreet legal steps to confirm what he had always suspected. This wasn't a public effort. There were no headlines, no press releases. Instead, he approached a well-regarded European genetics laboratory known for working with high-profile clients under strict confidentiality. According to multiple sources familiar with the situation, the goal was clear: determine biological paternity with scientific certainty. But to do that, Sebastian would need a viable DNA sample from King Charles III. That alone would seem nearly impossible. Yet, according to a former palace staffer who has since left the UK, a sympathetic contact within royal maintenance quietly provided a strand of hair retrieved from a used travel comb belonging to the king. The sample was carefully collected and verified by third-party witnesses to ensure it met legal standards. Sebastian's own sample was submitted under laboratory supervision, with full documentation to preserve the chain of custody. What followed were weeks of silent waiting. No statements, no leaks, just anticipation. Then the results came back. The test confirmed a 99.97% match between Sebastian and King Charles III. In the world of genetics, that figure leaves almost no room for interpretation. The test was legitimate, the chain of evidence was secure, and the results were unmistakable. Faced with this knowledge, Sebastian and his legal advisors chose to take a restrained approach. Instead of going public immediately, they drafted a private letter addressed directly to King Charles. The package included a full copy of the genetic results, notarized documentation from the laboratory, and a brief handwritten note from Sebastian himself. The note was simple. It made no legal threats and asked for nothing material. It requested only one thing: public acknowledgement of the truth. Clarence House received the letter through a private legal channel, not through media or public sources. The hope was that a private approach would lead to a dignified conversation. Instead, what followed was complete silence. There was no reply, no acknowledgement. Behind the palace walls, however, the situation became urgent almost immediately. According to insiders familiar with the palace's reaction, phones rang non-stop in the 48 hours following receipt of the letter. Lawyers were briefed. Public relations teams were instructed to prepare a strategy. There were emergency meetings held in private rooms, some involving senior legal counsel who had worked with the royal household for decades. One advisor, speaking anonymously, said the concern wasn't about whether the test was real. It was. The concern was about what to do now that the truth was confirmed. Palace sources described the atmosphere during those days as suffocating. Tension built rapidly. Queen Camilla reportedly canceled a public engagement, and security personnel were reshuffled to manage internal movement. Camilla, once again at the center of a personal and public storm, was described by staff as furious, betrayed, and deeply shaken. According to multiple accounts, her emotional response was immediate and severe. A longtime palace maid was seen leaving Camilla's quarters in tears. Another staff member recalled hearing crystal glassware shattering against the walls. The Queen reportedly locked herself in her room for several hours after reading the letter. Her fury, according to those who heard it, wasn't just about the past. It was about what the revelation meant for the future. Camilla had spent decades working to reshape her public image, rising from the role of royal mistress to queen consort. She had faced intense public criticism in the wake of Princess Diana's death. Over the years, she worked carefully to soften that narrative, often appearing in charity work, family events, and official royal duties. But now, with a scientific report threatening to upend the image she had built, she found herself back in the spotlight, this time as the stepmother to a man whose very existence undermined her place in the monarchy story. Behind closed doors, Camilla reportedly demanded a strong response. She urged palace lawyers to issue a public denial, challenge the DNA results, and, if needed, pursue legal action against any media outlet that covered the story. But Charles, according to insiders, remained mostly silent. Those present described him as distant, uncharacteristically withdrawn. One aide said, "He wasn't surprised. He looked like someone remembering something they never wanted to face again." The silence from King Charles left the palace in a delicate position. Without a firm denial or a statement of acknowledgement, the public narrative was left to unfold on its own. And it did. The DNA report, originally shared in private, was soon leaked to legal circles in Europe. Someone familiar with the situation, frustrated that the palace appeared to be burying the evidence, shared it with a foreign journalist. The story quickly crossed borders, picked up by online news outlets, and quietly confirmed by independent legal contacts. The headlines were swift and unforgiving. Royal DNA bombshell, secret son confirmed. King Charles fathered child in 1980, lab finds. The Crown's quietest scandal now has proof. For the first time in modern history, the royal family was facing a scandal that wasn't rooted in rumor or speculation, but in forensic science. Inside Clarence House, the pressure intensified. Staff reported an overwhelming sense of disarray. Public relations teams scrambled to control the messaging, but there was little they could do once the report was out. Camilla's anger reportedly escalated further. Security staff were allegedly assigned to her quarters not out of fear for her safety, but because her emotional volatility was affecting those around her. A leaked audio message, believed to be recorded during one of Camilla's private conversations, revealed the depth of her distress. In the recording, she reportedly says, "They're going to paint him as the rightful heir. I'll be seen as a fraud again." While not officially verified, the message was consistent with other reports describing her fear of being publicly replaced, not just as queen, but as the woman central to Charles's narrative. Meanwhile, Sebastian remained quiet. No interviews, no statements, no press appearances. His silence stood in stark contrast to the storm brewing behind palace walls. Some viewed this as a sign of dignity. Others saw it as a strategic choice. But regardless of interpretation, his lack of public demands made it harder for the palace to discredit him. Palace staff noted how the public quickly began to sympathize with Sebastian. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't pushing for a title. He was simply asking for the truth to be acknowledged. This made the royal silence appear even more calculated. The longer they said nothing, the more people assumed they were hiding something. For the monarchy, this situation was unlike any other. Scandals involving personal relationships, infidelity, or leaked stories had happened before. But never something this clinical, this scientific. The DNA report had no bias. It wasn't an opinion. It was evidence. Cold, factual, and hard to refute. As the story continued to circulate, questions began to pile up. Would Charles ever respond? Would the palace attempt to discredit the evidence? Could Camilla maintain her position under such intense scrutiny? And most of all, what does this mean for the future of the royal family? At the center of the calm was Prince William and Princess Catherine. While the palace walls were shaken by Camilla's emotional outbursts, and Charles's haunting silence, the Prince and Princess of Wales remained composed. Their public appearances during this time showed no sign of internal crisis. Smiling at charity events, attending royal engagements with their children, and remaining focused on their roles, William and Catherine projected a sense of stability. But according to sources familiar with their inner circle, this was not a case of being uninformed or indifferent. It was deliberate. Behind closed doors, William was reportedly shaken, but not shocked. He had heard the rumors growing up. Members of staff, distant relatives, even instructors at boarding school had made passing references to a possible half-brother, but there had never been solid proof, until now. With the DNA results confirmed, the situation was no longer just a rumor from the past. It was a challenge to the royal family's image and legacy. And William, known for being cautious and strategic, understood the importance of managing it carefully. According to those close to the prince, he issued a clear directive: no interference, no denials, no public statements. "We wait and we prepare," he reportedly told advisors. William wasn't focused on protecting his father's image or countering Sebastian's claims. His priority, sources say, was protecting the future, his children, the next generation of royals, and the stability of the monarchy itself. Catherine, who has long been described as William's emotional anchor, played a key role in shaping that approach. Behind the scenes, she focused on helping her team monitor public sentiment. Media analysts began tracking every mention of Sebastian across social media, press reports, and public comments. They weren't looking to stop the story. They were trying to understand it. What they saw was striking. The public wasn't angry with Sebastian. If anything, they admired his composure. Here was a man who, by most accounts, had lived a quiet and dignified life. He hadn't sold his story. He hadn't made demands. He had simply asked for the truth to be recognized. That made the palace's continued silence seem more damaging than ever. While Camilla struggled with the implications of the DNA results, reportedly cycling between anger and distress, and Charles withdrew into near silence, William and Catherine maintained their position. They would not comment. They would not engage in scandal. Instead, they focused on reinforcing the image of continuity and purpose. Publicly, their actions remained carefully measured. But privately, some speculated that William may be considering whether to reach out to Sebastian. It was unclear what such a meeting would achieve, but as the future head of the monarchy, William may have seen it as a way to acknowledge the human reality of the situation, without disrupting the institution he's expected to lead. Meanwhile, the attention on Sebastian continued to grow. Journalists began digging deeper into his past, trying to find contradictions or signs of inconsistency. They found none. His education, financial support, and movements over the past 20 years all aligned with earlier reports. There was no evidence of deception or manipulation. Instead, his story seemed to grow more credible with each new detail. As more information came to light, members of the public began to raise serious questions about why the royal family hadn't addressed the issue. In previous generations, scandals were often brushed aside or managed with vague statements. But in the age of digital media, that approach was becoming less effective. Silence was now seen as avoidance, not protection. The impact was beginning to show. Polling data, shared by private political analysts, suggested a subtle shift in public opinion. Trust in the monarchy was still relatively high, but for the first time in years, a significant portion of respondents said they believed the royal family should come clean about past secrets, especially when scientific evidence was involved. Inside the palace, that shift wasn't ignored. Legal advisors warned that continued silence could make any future statement look like a forced response rather than a proactive move. Some suggested releasing a short public acknowledgement, something that neither confirmed nor denied the story, but expressed empathy and understanding. But that option was reportedly rejected. The royal household, still reeling from Camilla's reaction and Charles's hesitation, remained undecided on how to proceed. Meanwhile, Sebastian remained quiet. Friends close to him say he had no interest in press conferences or public confrontation. But after the report was leaked and confirmed, the story was no longer under his control. He had become a symbol, not just of a possible royal secret, but of the broader demand for truth and accountability. What happens next remains uncertain. Some believe that King Charles may eventually issue a private letter or make a subtle reference in a future speech. Others think the matter will simply fade away as the news cycle moves on. But many close to the situation say it's unlikely this will disappear completely. The DNA report is now part of the public record. It has been seen, shared, and verified. Ignoring it won't erase it. Camilla's position remains particularly fragile. Though officially supported by palace staff, her public image has taken another hit. For years, she worked to move beyond the role of the other woman, gradually earning a place as queen consort. But the emergence of Sebastian, whose story predates both her and Diana, brings back the narrative she worked so hard to bury. It reintroduces the idea that Camilla was not the first or the only deep connection in Charles's life, and that reality, however distant, still matters. Palace insiders say she feels increasingly isolated. Her public schedule has been reduced. Security around her has been tightened, not because of external threats, but to protect her from further emotional episodes. Staff have been told to be exceptionally discreet around her, particularly when it comes to discussing press coverage. As for Charles, his silence continues. The man who now leads the monarchy has not made any personal statement. He has not acknowledged the DNA results, nor has he disputed them. Those who have worked closely with him say he seems more introspective than ever, avoiding conversations that touch on the subject. Some suggest he may be struggling with guilt, not just over the affair itself, but over the decades of distance and secrecy that followed. In the end, this story is no longer just about one man and a DNA test. It's about legacy, about how a centuries-old institution handles uncomfortable truths in an era of transparency. Whether or not Sebastian ever receives public acknowledgement, his story has already changed something. It has shown that no one, not even a king, is above human connection or the consequences of choices made long ago. It has revealed cracks in the royal armor that tradition alone can't hide. And it has forced a new generation, William, Catherine, and even their children, to think carefully about how they will lead in a world that no longer accepts silence as an answer. The monarchy will likely survive this. It always has. But the message is clear. Secrets may stay buried for years, even decades. But eventually they surface. And when they do, even the crown must answer to the truth.